Alex. Still sketchy. I've got a moment, I'll show you some art. My masterpiece. This guy, also very philosophical. This guy is going to be finished someday. Let's be another here while I interview you.
Hi.
This is Barbara Morey. I'll give her an official introduction once we Welcome to the fourth episode of the Mindful Activist podcast. I'm the host, Matt Reddy. I am an activist. I'm a meditation practitioner of mindfulness. I'm also the developer of the Hive1.net software and the founder of the Global Consensus Project, and I'm an elected politician. I'm a hospital commissioner in Jefferson County, Washington State. I'm joined today with Barbara Morey, who I know as a amazing activist. But that's mainly how we've interacted, and that's really, I know a lot about your activist activities. I don't actually, I also know you're a mother.
Yes. I have 42 foster children and one biological child.
You have 42 foster children.
Yes, all teenagers. And I have them 4 at a time, usually. All girls, except for 2 little brothers that happen to tag along over
Wow.
a period of 10 years.
That's amazing. That's right. I've heard you mention that over the years that we've known each other. So you are quite the nurturing soul in this world.
Well, it turned out that way. I didn't intend to have any children.
Yeah.
And then my husband died, and I realized that everything, the value from him was put in a shoebox. And I called my mother shortly after his death, and I said, I'm going to have a baby. And she said, you're what? And I said, yes, I want somebody to warp in my own image.
Wow.
So I have a daughter, Rebecca, who is very independent and very much her own image. I always thought that if I kind of brought her up right, she'd think independently, but that would always end up to think like me. That was wrong.
Yeah. So she thinks independently, but not always like you.
That's correct. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the same kind of I think the same thing happened to my dad. You know, he raised me to be a really critical thinker and to question things and to analyze things. And I think he got a little frustrated when I got into college and my values and beliefs started to diverge
Yes.
from his.
Yep.
And I don't think he's ever gotten over that.
I don't think my parents ever did really either.
Yeah. So, interesting. Okay. Is there anything else background-wise you'd like the vast audience of viewers to know about you before we get into
Well,
major topics?
I spent my professional career in the field of education, and I was an educational administrator. And I was a child of the 60s. My high school class was 1966. So we had Vietnam, we had civil rights, we had all kinds of things going on.
You graduated in 66.
High school, graduated in 66, right.
And so were you, as a high schooler, I don't know, was there major protests going on up while you were in high school?
Not where I was. I lived in a rural northern Wisconsin community, and we had Native Americans, and that was kind of the underclass of our community. But we didn't have a lot of the other, the things that were going on in a lot of civil rights issues. But my family was involved with civil rights issues. My father was a minister, and through the conference of the church, he was involved in not demonstrations and all so much, but in writing letters of support and drumming up support for people to listen to issues and participate in talking about issues.
Okay, so at either in high school or after high school, were you involved with Vietnam protests?
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, I started, my first activism was actually when I was around 10 or 12. My father was protesting at a local grocery store in a little tiny town, and he was demonstrating because there was some issue about about the grocery stores had all decided to be open on a certain night so that the farmers could come in. And this one grocery store thought, well, they'd get the business by staying open another night. So my father went down there with a picket sign saying, give Fridays a chance. And I went down with him, and that was my first demonstration. And he was down there all by himself, walking with his picket back and forth. And for years after that, in the local parade, kind of like the Rhodey Festival, our local parade there were people saying, we want Friday night or we want Saturday night. And it was kind of became a community joke almost. But it was my first experience with being on a picket line.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So, well, before we get into more stories, I should ask you the one question I ask my guests. I only have one set question, which is, do you consider yourself an activist?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And how long has that been like a part of your identity? Is it been since you were 12, or is it
Yes.
that was your first experience?
It's come in different ways over the years, but it's been since I was 12, or maybe even younger. But yes, it's been a long time. I remember as a child, we were traveling, we took family vacations, and we were traveling, and we came to a gas station, and there were out bathrooms, and I remember seeing the signs saying colored men and women. And I remember when I was a young adult, very young adult, going to a tavern, and they say, we don't serve Indians and dogs. Okay, so it's been part of my life, of being active in something, and being aware of situations has been part of my life, all my life.
So, I'm very curious how people react when they're faced with conflict, when they're faced with power, and activists they encounter that depending on what type of activism they do it in various ways. But do you, in general, how do you react to a power conflict when it is up against you?
First of all, the old thing of speak truth to power, I think, is very real.
And are you able to do that?
Most of the time.
Yeah.
But also using humor and using the power of people. For example, my house went into foreclosure a few years ago, and I was writing for an underground press at the time. And I went through the whole thing. I fought the foreclosure, went through the sale, and then I called up the bank afterwards and I said, I'm planning to write an article and I'd like to just give you the information about it. And I had actually worked out to have 25 raging grannies and grandpas tied to rocking chairs in my house to be evicted when I got my eviction. And
did that actually happen?
they canceled, that they rescinded the sale as if it had never happened. And then we went on and got a modification of the mortgage and everything, and I'm still in my home.
Okay, so your tactic, they were going to evict you, and you got an eviction notice.
Yes.
And you had a date
Yes.
of the eviction, and so what you did, you organized a ton of elders, who you called the raging grannies,
Yes.
to be ready to sit in your house,
Tied to rocking chairs.
so that when they came to evict, you'd have these, they'd have to decide to untie these elders from...
And haul them out in their rocking chairs or some way. And I already made plans to contact the press. I had sent out a news release. I had a news release ready for the press, and I had talked to a few people that I know in the press to be able to say, this may be coming up. And they said, keep us informed.
Did you have cameras ready for the incident?
You bet.
Yeah.
Cameras, reporters, the whole thing.
See, now we would have this. We'd have
Yes,
Facebook
that's
Live
right.
and YouTube. We would be ready to live stream the whole event.
Right.
It's such an amazing power, the power of recording,
Yes.
of transparency and recording. I've encountered this in many parts of my life. On the commission it's come up. But if you just say to people that are using their power and you think they're using their power in a way that's wrong, you just say, I'm just going to record it. I'm going to show how you use your power in the world, and we'll see how it turns out for both of us. We'll see, how the world reacts, because it forces the rest of the world to judge what happened.
Right.
It's kind of what happened. A much more extreme example, but with the in the civil rights movements with those the groups that went down to the South and went
Yes.
into restaurants and just said they just wanted to be served, and then violence occurred, and the world was sort of forced to see this is what is happening, and we have to now judge what is happening, and it puts pressure on the world to decide where they are
Right.
morally, is what's going on.
And I think that at that time, I remember hearing Walter Cronkite saying something about television changed the civil rights movement, and television gave validity to the civil rights movement. And I think that the people's press, the individual recordings like people are doing now, is the same kind of thing. It's a very powerful instrument for addressing all kinds of issues.
Yeah, I think, my attitude is, this has come up on Facebook Live, with people videotaping a police action or a police shooting, and I don't know if you were aware of this, but that one where the man was shot in the car and the woman started Facebook Live videoing it. I don't remember the names.
Right.
But I believe it was up on Facebook Live, and Facebook took it down for at least for a while. And this is like, it did go back up, but it was like such an important moment in our media and social media history, because if these cameras have the power to capture injustice, then it puts the social media company in the place of censorship or not censorship. Do they show a horrible thing that's happening, or do they censor it?
Or when police cams get instantly turned off for some reason, that's another indication of the power of having the videos and the recordings and things.
Yeah, Ron just threw us a pretty awesome question. How can the internet be better leveraged to harness and scale local and global people power for effective activism? What needs to be built? Well, yeah. Do you have an answer for that? I have an answer for that.
You give your answer, because I'm not a big part of the technological world. I have internet, and I do Facebook, and I do something, and I have a video camera, but I'm still connected to my video camera or to my actual camera as opposed to the camera in my phone and so on. So take it away.
Yeah. Well, funny you should ask that, Yaron, because the software I built, the Hive1.net software and the Global Consensus Project, is all about basically that, figuring out how to use the internet to leverage people power, to find alternatives to corrupt hierarchical systems. So, and we'll do, on future episodes, we're going to do more sort of demos of how that works. I did start this thing, but I didn't actually share the link with anyone, so no one would know that they could jump in. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to post a link now that any of you could use to join this conversation in video, and I'm going to post that.
While he's doing that, I was pre-technology in my career and everything too. I remember when we first had data information systems, and when we first had computerized sign-in sheets for employees and for students and everything in the school, and we kept records of everything handwritten in addition, because we were not trusting this new technology. And when I would get printouts of the pages that were accordion type pages, get printouts of those every month about all the students and all the activities that were going on and what my budget was and all. And that to me was high technology. But I also had a job working in a credit bureau, which when I first graduated from college, there were no teaching jobs available. So I worked for a credit bureau, and I happened to be there at the time that the Fair Credit Reporting Act went into place, and several of the fair credit issues were raised. And I was formally trained at a national level about consumer rights and consumer protection. I had no idea that I'd ever use that, and yet it's come in so handy at some time later in my life. So I was pre-technology, and I'm now approaching 70, and I'm pretty comfortable with the technology I have, but because I've made that transition, I recognize how important it is to have the technology, but also it's important to have the background of understanding what's behind the technology, what the sign-in sheets mean, what the statistics mean, instead of just putting them on on a computer or something and coming up with the answer. What does it mean when I do this? What does it mean when I participate in that? So, end of lecture.
Nice. Jeez, that was great. I can just step away and you'll talk.
Sure.
To the audience. That is so great.
My daughter says, put a nickel in me and I can do the whole dog and pony show.
So, well, since Yaron asked, and I started to explain it, I don't know, have you looked at any of this? Okay. So, Barbara and I were extremely involved with the Occupy Port Townsend movement. That is actually how we met, and we could give a little bit of that history. When probably the first day I showed up at the little Occupy Port Townsend protest that was going on every Saturday for 2 to 4 or something. I imagine you were probably there.
Oh yes.
You were often there. And do you remember what happened that day when we first met?
I'm not sure. Go ahead and remind me.
Okay, so I came up to the group and I said, I'm a facilitator and I'm aware of how the Occupy movement has been doing group facilitation. I've sort of been studying it. I could help us do a general assembly. And the group, we facilitated a little meeting right there, and we decided to meet up and plan a general assembly. And I don't know if he's still here, if Alex is still in the audience, but you remember Alex, Brian?
Hi, Alex.
Yeah, he was there, and he helped us sort of come up with a plan for how to facilitate a general assembly. We came up with agreements for how we would do proposals, how we would do consensus. We probably had like 3 weeks of planning meetings.
Yes.
We brought a facilitator from Occupy Seattle came over one night. I think Sean was his name, and he helped us plan it. And so then we had this massive General Assembly, Occupy General Assembly down at the UU Fellowship. And out of that General Assembly, Occupy working groups got created, and they started meeting. And I don't know, over the next year, Occupy Port Townsend was doing really interesting activist protests against money in politics, corporate power, foreclosures, and you and I were like meeting all the time during the weeks, and these protests, the big Bank of America protests. That
was so fun.
That was amazing. I mean, when I edit this together, I'll put video. I'll show some of the video, and you'll see Barbara there. I think you were wearing your like
Statue of Liberty
thing, and you're dancing around. Yes.
And we shut down the drive-through of the Bank of America. That was really cool. And we had the parade through town, carrying the tent.
All right, so there's been a couple comments. So I should explain the link that I put in there that you're saying is kind of useful. So the link is for joining this video conference. I should plug this in too, just in case we lose power.
I'm glad this is you and not me.
Yeah. Seeing Facebook Live doesn't support links. There's no way to copy and paste that link. That's really interesting. So in any case, if anyone wants to join this talk, the link that I posted to the Zoom software would actually take you into the video conference. And we could actually have up to 50 people video conferencing and talking to us right now using this Zoom video conferencing link. It looks like Yaron saying it's really hard to click the link, and I'm sorry about that. This is the 4th episode, so we'll get these kinks worked out. And then we'll just go with it if someone does drop in.
Sure.
But the reason I'm sort of like attempting to thread all of this together. So what I learned from the General Assembly process and the consensus process that we were experiencing in Occupy, that was what really taught me how to be in a group without hierarchy.
I agree.
Yeah. And it was like totally, it was like a revelation to me. We need to figure out how to do more of this, more non-hierarchical, non-power dynamic group decision making, and we need to figure out how to do it on a mass scale.
Right.
And so that's what I've been working on. That's what the Global Consensus Project is. Literally, how do you get global consensus? How do you facilitate global consensus on issues in the Hive 1 software? is my first attempt as a facilitator to design software that could let us facilitate a million people.
Wow.
Using basically the same thing I did when I facilitated General Assemblies, or when we did that. So this podcast is really just a way of telling people about that software.
Sure, that's fine.
But I mean, but I love it. Also, there's a benefit to talking about activism, because there's a lot of people say no when you ask them if they're an activist, and then I ask, well, do you care about what's going on in the world? Do you have any issues you want things to change? And most people say yes. There are some things they care about, and then I ask, do you do anything to try to impact those issues? And then sometimes they describe all this activist activities, but they don't like the label activist.
Well, I've come to some transitions in that too. I'm now officially an advocate as opposed to an activist in terms of how I introduce myself. I'm an advocate for affordable housing. I'm an advocate for special education students. I'm an advocate for people who are homeless.
Yeah.
And it's still the activism. It's a different form of activism. And I think with my age, I become less physically active and more active, I guess, in using the technology. For one, I've been writing an awful lot of letters to the city council and the planning commission and that kind of thing, which I wouldn't have been able to do previously. I'd have to go in and speak all the time.
Yeah.
But I've become more of an advocate, and I think that's my role at this time, because I have the experience of all these years, and being able to pull that together a little bit. I'm not able to go out and physically march as much as I'd like to, or attend all the committee meetings or anything else. I'm just physically not as able to do that. But I am able to sit at my computer and send notes to other people and say, get involved, and Tuesday night we're doing this, and so on.
Yeah. Well, there's always something you can do. There's always options.
Right. Well, when you mentioned that we were going to be talking today and you invited me, I started getting all kinds of ideas in my head. And what I came up with is the power of activism. And it's not necessarily how you do it, but that you are involved. For example, the power of the individual voice. My dad going to that grocery store and picketing all by himself. And the grocery store then started closing on the nights that everybody agreed to, and stayed open on the nights that everybody agreed to. One lone voice did that. Or the power of music. In the civil rights movement, music was such an important part of what we were doing, and we sang our way through the events of the civil rights movement. Or the power of speaking up. When I was a young adult, I confronted an adult for the very first time of getting in his face and saying, no, you're wrong. When Martin Luther King was assassinated, I was at the home of a friend they were first generation Polish. And the father said, if they'd shoot a few more of these, we wouldn't have any problem anymore with race. And I actually said, no, you're wrong. And I stood up for the very first time.
How old were you?
I was probably 18. No, 19.
And who was this you were saying?
This was the father of a friend.
Okay.
And the father, he was first generation immigrant from Poland, okay? And he was very definitely in a different world, different mindset from what I had been.
Yeah.
So I stood up to him. But what happened is his son then went with me to the open housing marches that were being held that week in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Was it as a result of your standing up to him?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, so it's, the power of an individual speaking up and confronting even those that we wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with. I was always taught respect your elders, and boy, at home if I had said something, I would,
Right.
So
yeah, I've encountered that in other situations. It's like you think, there's no point in challenging this person, because you're like, it's just going to create a heated moment, and it may not and you pretty much know it is not going to change this person's mind or where they is.
Right.
But there is a ripple effect of you doing that. You speaking up for what you think is right. It affects other people that hear it, and
Right.
that don't have the strength or courage in that moment to do it, and they wish someone would. It gives them some of that. It gives them some charge of energy and courage, even though it is potentially personally painful for you to do it.
and frightening.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And so So did that experience make you feel like, oh, I could do this again? Or did it make you feel like, I never want to do this again? This is really painful.
No, it was painful, but after I got thinking about it, and I went on to the march, and the son went with me, it was like, oh, there's some power there. You know, we didn't use the word empowerment at that time, it was too early. But there was some power there. There was a sense of, I can do this, and I'm not going to die. Well, sometimes, you know, in some situations you might, but it was a moment when I realized that I could directly address things that I saw as being unjust and have it turn out okay. And actually, like you said, have a ripple effect. And it wasn't my intention to do that at all. It was one time when I had to speak out because it was so blatantly incorrect, unjust in what he was saying, and so biased.
Yeah.
So, but some other things that I've learned, so I happen to make a little list. Being an educator, you know, I write everything down.
And Yaron's still asking good questions. There is
good.
a site, hive1.net is the website. At some point, we're going to have like somebody watching the Facebook comments, and then maybe we'll figure out a way to how to have our conversation and check in with the comments.
Do a Tom Hartman thing, huh?
Is that what? I don't know what that is.
Tom Hartman is the progressive speaker on Free Speech TV.
Oh.
And Sirius and all, and he has people talking in, but he has earplugs in, and then he has a computer in front of him, and his staff or his co-workers are always sitting there and typing, so and so says such, and what, you know, and he talks on the phone to people and everything. So,
yeah, it is. I mean, it's like, it's a lot going on, you know.
Yes.
It's like with the chat comments, and if we have someone drop in, but this is why I built the software I built, because it's like you have to think about, you have 1,000 people in the room. How do you interact with 1,000 people in a sensible way?
Yep.
There's end of protest. What's the best way to engage these people pragmatically? So interesting. So in Israel, we are repeatedly on the receiving end of protests. What's the best way to engage these people pragmatically? So
the thing of truth to power, to me, just encapsulates that. How do we approach people? And when we approach, like in the situation with Israel and Palestine, okay, if we make it personal, if we make it not just numbers of how many people were killed and how many bombs were there and who they came from and all that kind of thing, but make it personal. These families, these incidents happen, and then to speak truth of why did these happen? What happened here? What was behind this? And address those truths. Then we can impact the power. And I really think that that's true on a national and international level and on an interpersonal level.
Yeah, it's I've learned a lot from living in a community. You know, I live in an intentional community.
Yes.
And you see conflict at a very raw personal level occur. And it's very easy to extrapolate how this just in a community anywhere, how little conflict just balloons into massive, conflicts of groups. Because, I mean, if you can do it in a community of 20 people, that you can have this conflict, this divide between people, and they're not talking to each other, and they're bitter about something that happened
so personal.
Years ago. Yeah, and then it's it all comes down to basically what you're saying. It's just like a lack of personal understanding, lack of empathy for what's going on with the other person. And then, because usually, I mean, and I'm not claiming to be good at this, but if we had a conflict over something, I mean, the cure is you just have to go and see what is at the root of it.
Right.
What is, and I guess the way they say it, what is your root need? What need is it that you're trying to fulfill with this item that we're in conflict over? What need am I trying to fulfill that seems to put me in conflict with you? Because when you do that, if you break it down, you often see your needs are not actually opposed to each other. It's like you think the solution that you've come up with and my solution, we've come up with different solutions and those are in conflict. But if we go back to the need,
Right.
And then we look at our co-need and we say, how can we create a solution that works for both of us? In my experience, the vast majority of the time, there are great co-creating solutions. But it's like we get attached to our position.
Yes.
And it's like, and then it's ego. It's like, and I see this on the commission, on the hospital board, and it's like, person has been fighting for this position. Now they're attached to that. You come in and you say, well, that's not the greatest idea. You try to say it gently. You try to say, I know you've been attached to this idea for a long time, but what if we did it this way? There might be some benefits to that. It's very hard to let go of the idea you were defending. It also, you can feel like a pride thing, of like, it makes you look like you were wrong. And so then, you have this feeling that people think I was wrong about something, and there's, especially if you're a politician, to change your mind publicly can kind of make you, make some people feel weak in the eyes of people.
So I think what you were saying about getting to the root of the problem and not just working on the solution is very important, because it's a matter of, for example, in dealing with homelessness in Jefferson County now, we all know now that it's a big problem in Jefferson County. We have 355 homeless individuals we have the third highest number of veterans that are homeless in the state, behind King County and Thurston County. So we have a huge number.
Third highest number?
In the state, number of vets,
like
not
raw
rate,
number.
Raw number
in
of vets.
In a county of 30,000 people,
Correct.
we have...
The third highest number of veterans homeless in the state.
How many people?
That I don't know. I don't know the number.
All right.
And we're behind King County and Thurston County, which of course are big urban areas.
Yeah.
We have Section 8 vouchers, which is a problem all over with the subsidized housing and all this. We have 137 vouchers, and there's an estimated 44 places for them to use their vouchers. So we know the problem, but then how do we solve that? Well, some of us have gone out and started a tent village. Well, tent village has all kinds of connotations to it. So there are politicians and people in offices who say, we can't have tent villages, this is bad, looks bad, and all this kind of thing. Then we go to them and say, what can we do instead of that? Okay, well then we'll have it at this location. That's good. We'll go to a particular campground and rent spaces there so it's not so in your face. Okay, and then from there it's a matter of, but what do we do long term? Well, we need a 24/7 shelter. Okay, so who's going to do that? And how are we going to do that? And instead of being this way, which we started off being, we are now at least talking the same talk and beginning to understand how we can begin to address some of these issues, and that we must address them, that it's not an option whether or not we're going to address them. We must address these issues. And so like the county commission meets tonight, or the city council meets tonight to talk about the comp plan, and they're talking specifically about housing and affordable housing and the homeless situation, because we brought it up as an issue over the last 2 years.
This is city council tonight.
City council
Port
tonight.
Townsend City Council meeting
6:30
tonight.
Mm-hmm.
6:30, and they're going to be talking about
the homeless encampments, tent encampments,
mm-hmm.
and housing for the homeless as it applies to the comprehensive plan. So
Okay.
and what they're planning to do for the next 10 years of concrete plans, goals, policies, and all that kind of thing.
And what do you think they should do?
I think, first of all, we need to have more affordable housing. We just plain don't have enough facilities, enough units. And that's going to take 5 to 10 years minimum to develop. I think we need to have some strong interim measures. Things like a 24/7 shelter. For example, there's the old Union Bank building that's closed up on Sims Way. That would make an excellent place, excellent location, advertisement here, an excellent location for a 24/7 shelter. It's near DSHS, it's near social services for mental health, it's near things for drug addiction programs, it's off of the downtown route, it's on a bus stop, it's near the grocery stores. Anyway, so kind of putting a plug in to do something like that, have a 24/7 shelter. We could also have a village of tiny houses, which is happening all across the country in dealing with homelessness. And I have a location in mind that I'm really attached to. I had to smile when you mentioned that, because I'm truly attached to a particular location, which the county has said no way.
Yeah.
But I'm still attached to it. And so but if they could come up with another way that we could do this, that would
What
work.
location? Do you want to tell what location?
Sure. There used to be a county campground right next to the Tri-Area Center in Chimacum. It was a park that has 12. It's a park of 12 acres. It had 30 designated campsites originally. It has a shelter building that's in disrepair, but it has water and electricity to the shelter building. It's been closed since 2009, and officially the repurposing of it is for a potential dog park. So, after researching that out and checking out the plans and everything, we proposed it to the county for a place to put a village of 10 to 15 tiny houses. Tiny houses are 250 square feet or less. They are essentially similar in function and size to an RV.
Mm-hmm.
So it would be natural to put them in a campground, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the county has responded with this. We have plans, governmental use plans for this property, and you may not use it. But there's nothing in the official plans, in the planning commission plans, anything there on paper that says what their plans are. So in the interim, while they're doing that, we could have our village of tiny houses there for 3, 4, 5 years, while everybody else is getting the more permanent housing going. So, I'm stuck on that, and I would gladly take another location. But what they're doing across the country for housing with these tiny villages like Quixote Village in Olympia and in Eugene, Washington, and Eugene, Oregon, and in Portland and so on, the government municipalities are leasing land, public land, to a nonprofit to set up a village of tiny houses. So if the county or the city has some unused public property that they would like to lease to a nonprofit for 5 years, 10 years, something like that, for us to have a village of tiny houses as interim housing,
Mm-hmm.
I'm all for it.
Nice. Okay. Is there anything else you want to say about the housing issue? I was going to go back to.
No, I think that's
Okay.
that's enough right now.
All right. All right. So just I'd love to ask a couple more questions about how you work with power.
Okay.
So have there been instances where the power conflict came to pretty intense moments? You said, you were prepared for the eviction, but that moment didn't actually happen.
Right.
And so have there been moments where you've had a pretty intimidating level of force in front of you?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. I was at a demonstration at Dow Chemical during the Vietnam War. They were the makers of napalm. And I was at the plant, and I had arrived early for the demonstration, and I ended up right in front of the gates, the main gates. And the crowd started coming in, and there was some disturbances in the crowd. Police were arresting people and pushing people around and all. And I was pushed right toward the gate. And on the other side of the gate, there were security people with bayonets attached to their guns, sticking them through the fence.
Bayonets?
Bayonets, the knife thingy that goes on the end of a gun, sticking them through the fence, pointing at us demonstrators.
And we were being police or security?
Security inside the Dow Chemical plant.
Security with bayonets.
Yes.
It's just like I just can't get over that. Okay.
Yep. And so they were inside the gate on the Dow Chemical side with their bayonets pointed outside the fence, and we were being pushed towards them by the crowd. That was very scary. That was very, very scary. So, but we survived, and we were able to. I'm not sure how we even got out of that, but I remember going to the side somehow, and that we didn't make it. We didn't get skewered.
So how do you react in moments like that? If someone's raising their voice to you, how do you do you rise up to it? Do you freeze? Do you or do you do you go away and have to regroup? What type of?
It kind of depends on the situation. Generally, what I do is I do this. It's not a freeze, but I call it icy cold response, and it allows me to be more objective, or not necessarily objective. I don't think that's the right word, but to be more controlled in what I'm doing in my response. And so it's like taking a deep breath and then recentering. Okay, is what we'd say in current languages.
Yaron says he needs to drop, but he said thank you for.
Oh,
But,
all right, bye.
See, it's like I don't know whether we should like respond to the chat
No,
while you're in
that's
the middle of
fine.
saying
No, that's
something.
fine.
Okay.
So I try to get in control and centered, and then continue with the confrontation. I don't like to back down. I don't think that it serves a positive purpose in most situations. There are times when it's important to back down, but those are times when it's a life-threatening kind of thing. And then you don't back down, you step back. And I think there's a difference between the two. But for me personally, it's a matter of getting centered and then continuing. And I use my voice a lot. And I've been told that my voice gets very strident when I get in these kind of positions. And I imagine it does. And sometimes that's not to my benefit or the benefit of the cause that I'm representing, because my voice then becomes a weapon, in effect. Yeah. And that's not positive either. So I need to learn how to control that. But I don't generally tend to back down. And then the other thing that I do is then when I get a chance away from the situation and reflect on it, I do come back and address the situation with the person that's involved. Now, in this day and age, it's by email. So if somebody says or does something that's absolutely out of line with reality, shall we say, okay, makes a statement or puts an example out there of something that's just not true, and call them on it at the point, but then go back and then off the record get hold of that person and say, here's what you need to know. And I'm concerned that you are publicly stating these things and you're wrong and you're prejudicing people against what's the reality here. And here's the truth, and you need to be aware of it. And then if they don't respond to that, going a step further and going to their boss, if somebody's on a board of an agency, going to the agency and saying, your board member is putting your agency in jeopardy. Would you please talk to him about this issue? So I don't just step back and go away or cower, but I don't always confront it directly if it's not going to serve a positive purpose and it's not going to have a positive impact.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think I've learned a lot from being on the commission and being because it's like frequent sort of like conflict over issues, over worldviews, over values, and I sort of been feeling my way through how to deal with these conflicts. But I guess I've kind of settled on the only thing that matters is that you speak your truth, and that you are, and of course being, continuously trying to listen and learn and see if you need to alter your view, alter your ideas. But ultimately, if you're pretty clear on what your truth is in the moment of this issue, speak your truth. And it doesn't matter if you win an argument or win a moment.
Right.
I mean, even in those protest moments, it's like if you're there, you're standing for what you believe, and you have a sign potentially that says what you believe in, you're standing by that. It's like that you've already accomplished what you need to accomplish by bringing your truth to that space. And I don't know that there is, for me, there's not, it depends on the moment, but pushing when the violence happened, when the conflict, pushing on that moment, well, I guess I go towards the side of put yourself in the space and then make the violence press against you. Do not, and so it's sort of just speak your truth, stand for your truth, and if violence presses against you, then you have a decision of how much of that you're going to, are you going to, depends on what level of violence you're willing to experience in that moment.
I think what you've just said is really important. I think activists that's exactly what we need to do as advocates. We need to speak our truth. We need to see the situation. We need to speak our truth as we see it. We need to stand for our truth. And then we need to, I'm very much anti-violence. Okay, so we don't need to necessarily back down, but we need to address our truth in some way that's going to be nonviolent. And I think what you're doing and what your perspective is very, very valid on that.
Yeah. And it often, on the, in terms of just verbal, sparring, on the commission, it's often, I say what I have to say, I get sort of like some heated argument back, and it's almost like people expect, oh, we're going to have a debate here and argue and see who can win the debate, and I don't really, I'll make a few points, but you tend, in these public, especially in public settings, people don't actually tend to be really listening, I think, to what other people are saying. So I think growth and adaptation in these public settings doesn't really happen.
I think having good research and good knowledge of your topic helps too.
Sure.
Sometimes it's a matter of having data, and in this day and age we're data driven with everything, but having actual statistics and data and information, facts, 355 homeless individuals, or information that is concrete and not something that's a debate or a matter of opinion or anything, but is a concrete piece of information. And here's the reality. Now, what do we do about it? And I think that helps a lot. And that can be done either face to face, it can be done behind scenes, so people can save face when you're having a discussion and nobody wins or loses, but to actually have, I think it's so important to have truth, but truth not being just principle, standing on principle, but standing on fact as well.
Yeah. Great. Well, is there any other topic you want to delve into that you want to share your opinion with the world?
Yes, there is one more thing. Back when I was living in Seattle,
Drew and Deborah have joined, at least briefly.
Hi. So I'm going to talk about the power of the grassroots, because this is really important. We learned a lot of that in the Occupy movement, but also I lived in Seattle for a period of time when I was doing my foster caring and foster parenting. And at one point we had a grassroots overturning of the Seattle Public School Board. We as a community got together. There was some big issues with the Seattle Public Schools, still are, but there were some big issues. And we got 4 people who were community members. The whole community got behind them, and we overturned the Seattle Public School Board in one election. And it was a remarkable experience. And it was one of these things where we were all amateurs, okay? We weren't in there for the money, we weren't in there for the pride and all this, we were in there for the cause. And we won. But what I took away from that, we spent, at that time for Seattle Public School Board, it was $20,000 approximately. It cost $20,000 to run a campaign per candidate. We raised all of that within the community, kind of like it was before GoFundMe, but it was that idea. We all chipped in our pennies and nickels and dimes and made signs and all of that kind of thing. But what happened after that is corporate interests came in, and the next election round, where we had the 4 people in, they were in for 4 years, okay? The next election round, outside funding sources from major corporations spent $120,000 per candidate. It turned our people out and bought the next election, okay? So, but the fact that we were able to do this, and we were able to do it as a community, turning over the Seattle School Board is not a minor accomplishment. And during those 4 years, we got a lot done. But they came out, our people came out against charter schools and came out in favor of certain progressive ideas for education. And the powers that be didn't like that. The moneyed powers that be didn't like that. And so they were thrown out of office. But the power of people being able to do that, it was amazing to us that in this big city with these, few million people and stuff, we were able to actually turn over the school board, and we were all just regular folk, So
nice.
So yeah, so that was really, really nice. And so that power of the people, and yes, they did get turned out again 4 years later, but we were able to do it. And if we could do it there, we can do it other times. It's a matter of having the public will, having the public support, getting people understanding what the issues are, and getting them to say, Either hell no, we won't go, as in Vietnam, or this is what we want, and this is what we don't want, and standing up for it. And it can be done. And, that's just so, whenever I get discouraged, I go back to that, and I pull out the old newspaper clippings, and I look at them, and I go, yeah, we can do this. We, the people, can do this. And it doesn't take us all of the wealth and everything. We can do this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, okay, I did think of another topic.
All right.
Okay, a question for you. Mm-hmm. You know how they break up populations into demographic groups, Yes. Do you think, in terms of, being active for change in the world, if you were going to have, 100 people of a certain demographic group show up to a protest, and I'm not talking about race, I'm just talking about like age and gender.
Okay.
Do you think a certain demographic has more power than another in terms of 100 people of this group showed up and they were facing, big resistance from security or police. Mm-hmm. Do you see the demographic groups having different powers?
Yes. I think that the group that has the most power right now in our society is white men around the age of 40, professionally employed.
So I totally agree with you in terms of so you mean in terms of a protest?
Or just in terms of power? Anything, in terms of power.
So that's
So if 100 people, 100 white men who are doctors, lawyers, teachers, whatever, show up for something, they're going to have tens, maybe thousands, hundreds of times the power of any other demographic that shows up.
And you're saying, that's so interesting because I'm going a completely different direction than what you're saying. It's interesting because during the Occupy movement, I did not feel, professionally employed white men were the most powerful presence in those groups.
No.
Did you agree with me there?
Well, we were a pretty homogenous group here, so I don't know.
See, even here. I mean, we had some youth. We had some 20-somethings. We had elder men and women. Right. We had
but we were all white. We were all
basically.
We were all basically middle class. There weren't many of us that were not.
Yeah. It's so interesting. So I've been thinking about this a lot, especially when it comes to when say the police want to drag someone away from a protest. Say say the Bank of America, we were sitting in front of it. In terms of when violence is going to be used, even just the level of force, what I think about is who is it hardest for a police officer to do violence or anyone to do violence against. And I don't think white men are the hardest to do violence against. They're actually very easy to do violence against because, if and I didn't mean to make it a racial thing, just in terms of a male force, it's, if you see violence between a police officer and an adult male, that's one thing. But if you see it against a high schooler or teenager, it's very different. You see it against an elder, it's very different. If you see it against an elder woman, I think it's actually extremely different.
But that doesn't mean she has power. And you were asking about power.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a response to violence, public violence. But if you have a demonstration going on, like a number of demonstrations we've had in Seattle, okay, WTO for example.
Yeah.
The people that were getting arrested were the people who were of color, the young adults who were throwing bricks. They weren't arresting women, you're right, but they weren't arresting the people who were the leaders of the pack, so to speak. They weren't arresting the white men who were speaking at the ceremony at the demonstrations and stuff. They weren't arresting, for the most part. And they weren't arresting them violently, like they were the protesters and all. And I think that if you have an issue that's coming up, let's even locally at the city council, okay? City council has meeting about anything. If you have a group of 15 white men around 40 years old go in and talk to the city council, and you have a group of 15 white women go in and talk to the council, and you have a group of 15 teenagers go in and talk to the council, the one the council is going to listen to the most are those white men.
I hear you. I guess what I am really talking about when it comes to standing up to force, because I think you're right. When it comes to, like, you know, trying to make decisions by convincing people and influence, there is, yeah, I totally hear what you're saying. I mean, there's an entrenched power. I guess it's just it's something sort of that you taught me by your presence in the Occupy movement, by you coming to the Bank of America protest and you standing in the drive-thru and dancing around. I realized I felt an enormous difference in my level of safety because you were there. Because having, I mean, I think of it, I've heard it referred to as like grandmother power. There is, and other activists have talked about this. If you have a protest and it's lots of, you know, lots of young men and women doing it, it's one thing. But if you have grandmothers there, you know, it totally changes the feeling and it just changes the power. I feel like, I mean, like, this is the way I think of it. If a, let's say violence broke out, not necessarily cops, just like violence broke out in a group and everyone's now screaming what to do, who are you going to listen to? You know, it's like, yeah, there'll be like men screaming, you know, to do something. But, I mean, I would like defer to, I mean, if a grandmother asks you to do a fight for something, that is like such a power. Who's going to defy that? I don't know. Does that make any sense?
It does. I have an example of that. Okay. So I was at a demonstration in Seattle. I don't remember what it was for this time. And we were blocking the traffic. And so the police started stopping us as we were walking down 4th Avenue or wherever we were. The police would stop us before the light would go, before the light would change. And we had to be on the sidewalk. We couldn't be on the street. So there was this other older woman and I happened to have my walker because I had just had my knees replaced. I had my walker and there was another woman with a cane. And the two of us looked at each other but never said a word. And we managed to step off the curb just before the police stopped the crowd from going. And it took us that whole time of the light change to get across that little intersection. And isn't that amazing? I mean, we could have done it in 2.5 seconds, but it took us that whole light. And we managed to do that for 3 different intersections before the police caught on. So yes, there is some power there. There's a respect for it, a respect from the power groups for older people and older women. And especially when you have a walker and a cane, you know. So there is some power in that, yes. I mean, well, the Raging Grannies, they stopped 11 trains outside of Portland by putting sitting in wheelchairs on the tracks. 11 trains, you know. In
many ways, in a society that actually is not willing to become a brutal, violent place, in a way, I feel like grandmother energy is amongst the most powerful. I think there's a youth energy too. Like if high schoolers came out. And I mean, there is a youth power that's also incredible. It's sort of like, I actually sort of feel it's like at those two ends of the spectrum. And those groups often don't really realize it. They are the most powerful groups in society, if in some ways, in some, you know, dimensions of where conflict arises, and have incredible potential for leadership, for the change that needs to happen.
Right, and the enthusiasm and the just openness of youth is so important, and it is very powerful. And harnessing it isn't what you want to do, because you don't want to draw that into what we, the older folks, do. But getting the youth to be able to, teaching them how to use that power is very important. I would agree with you on that. Yeah, very absolutely. And then getting involved, and then having a lifetime of involvement, whether you call it activism or advocacy or just being a pain in the butt, being involved in issues that are important to them individually and then to society.
So I think we'll probably wrap it up there.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being my 4th official guest on my podcast. I personally find you inspiring. You know, I learned a lot from you through my, you know, when I became an activist.
Well, that was mutual, Matt.
Yeah.
We really did. You've been within the system a little bit more than I have in some ways, and I've learned a lot from your studied presence.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope you'll be happy to come back sometime if we have a discussion that you're interested in, or if you just want to be a
Sure.
guest.
And will you come to jail if I end up there?
If you come to jail?
Will you come to jail if I end up there?
Yeah.
All right.
A jailhouse interview. That would be amazing. I'd love to do that.
Oh, there's one other thing that I found is
Yeah.
really helpful. I'm a professional clown on the side. That's why I did the Lady Liberty kind of thing at our Bank of America stuff. But I carry a clown kit with me, an instant clown kit with a red nose and some lipstick and some things. Because I found that clown energy, like old people energy, can diffuse a situation.
The humor energy that,
The humor energy, and it diffuses it. It doesn't get rid of it, but it diffuses it. And so sometimes I find it necessary to use that as opposed to my granny stuff.
Sure.
And it's an interesting kind of perspective on things. And just, I had never thought doing the clowning stuff would have any impact on that, but it does.
Yeah.
So I literally carry my instant clown set with me all of the time.
Yeah.
And use that. So there are various ways of approaching issues and confrontations, and like when they tend to get to the violent stage, that's where a clown can step in and defuse it.
Yeah.
Even more so than a granny, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and these are actually all topics that would be great for future episodes. There's the power of humor in power dynamics. There's also music and dance, the power those have. They can be incredible tools in actual protest and activism, but also in just any moment of conflict.
Yes.
These tools could be used.
The power of the arts is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it has been all through history.
Yeah.
Good. Well, great talking to you.
Great talking to you. Thank you very much. Thank you, those that dropped in. Hey, Stevie, and Drew dropped in for a little bit. Let's just see what Drew said. He said, did you guys already talk about the Bernie thing? Or am I way off topic here? Feel free to move along. There was a lot of grassroots action for... Oh, yeah. All right, so there's the whole Bernie Sanders grassroots.
Yes, yes.
Donald Trump, too, is actually an example of grassroots power.
He is, yes.
It's on the left and the right wing.
Yeah.
So Stevie, you need to be a guest someday. I think he's off to, is he off in college yet? Yeah, he should be. He's off in college.
That started now.
Yeah. All right. That's it for this episode of The Mindful Activist. Thank you, Barbara, for joining. You can see past episodes on the globalconsensusproject.org or on the Mindful Activist Facebook page. We're going to be doing more episodes, and there's going to be lots of opportunities for people to join in and be part of the discussion as we work out the kinks in making that happen. So thank you.
Power to the people.
All right. Thank you, everyone that dropped in or who watched this on reruns. Thank you. So we're going to stop this.